The events haven't necessarily turned out ideally, especially going back to the 2016 primaries, because we're living in the world of the 2016 primaries. But there were bright spots. Immediately after the midterm elections, the question, at least in the United States, is who's running for president. And there's been an interesting tidbit of news that for many of us who still have that burn would love to hear. This video is not going to be long because there's not much to it. It's just somewhat of a tweet. But it's a tweet that gives a little bit of inspiration, maybe the strong word, but let's say hope. Let's say a whisper of a dream. Let's take a look at it. So first, this is Dave Weigel. Dave Weigel is a reporter for the Washington Post. The mustachioed man himself that looks like an 80s porn star. Now, he's had certain run-ins with one Jimmy Dore that are utterly hilarious. But Weigel dropped this bit of news in a tweet. Just off the phone with Bernie Sanders, one independent senator from Vermont, Bernie Sanders, that crushed his opponent by like 70 yesterday, who says in response to the 2020 presidential run that he's talking to a whole lot of people about which candidates would do best in the battleground states, and he is encouraged by yesterday saying a path to the 270 electoral votes is clear. Now, that sounds like one independent senator for Vermont, Mr. Bernie Sanders, has been talking about a presidential race. Now, the thing is, he has been talking about a presidential race because he would be insane not to talk about a presidential race. Early on, it was reported, I think it was by The Hill, that Bernie Sanders didn't want Joe Biden to take it because he has earned it. We're in the context of a world that Bernie Sanders has built. The number one issue that came up yesterday was Medicare for all. Healthcare. Sanders put that into the public consciousness. That wasn't anybody else. Sanders. Obama came out recently for Medicare for all. That was Sanders. Obama couldn't even be bothered, barely, begrudgingly, to give a public option or to bring up a public option. And the moment he got elected, it was scuttled. He chastised Hillary Clinton, saying, I am not going to have people that have to pay a penalty for not having health care, and then immediately runs a health care plan that has a penalty associated with it if you don't get the health care. And now, one independent senator from Vermont that built the structure of the language to which we are using, that has moved the Overton window of debate, mind you, who was helped by certain failures and defects in Obamacare, and even worse defects and failures and just cruelty of Trump care. But 70% of the public, including a majority of conservatives, are on board for Medicare for all. That one independent senator from Vermont that has absolutely earned his place to run in a presidential primary may potentially be running. If you remember, Hillary Clinton barely was beating Trump by like 1 point in the polling, whereas Bernie Sanders was beating him by like 10, 15 points. The public wanted something fundamentally different. They wanted a transformative change in the way that the world has been going on. And they weren't going to get it in Hillary Clinton. They were going to get it in Sanders. And unfortunately, to some degree, moderately, at the very least in rhetoric, from Trump. When the left-wing option wasn't available, they threw themselves at the right-wing option. That independent senator from Vermont that was beating the stuffing out of Donald Trump in the last primary, meaning from the standpoint of polling, may be gearing up to run. He's been having foreign policy speeches. He's been talking to African American communities, Native American communities, LGBT communities. He's been shoring up the areas that were weaknesses in the last presidential campaign, because let's be honest, Bernie Sanders ran in that campaign in order to push Hillary Clinton to the left. It was only after he realized, oh my God, people are digging what I'm putting out, that he actually started to run that race harder, and he started to hit her harder, particularly on her defects, particularly on her right-wing policies, be it military or be it her weaknesses in domestic policies. We're going to have a different field of candidates that are going to be running in the primaries. Those candidates are going to be aping many of the policies that Bernie Sanders wants to put out. But there is only one Bernie Sanders. And if he announces that he's running beyond just this tweet that kind of gives this wisp, this hope, he will start off as the number one contender, the person most likely to win, or let's say a front runner in the contest. Whisper a dream. Some of us, I know some of us aren't, but some of us are still feeling the burn. My wife is still feeling the burn. I am still feeling the burn. The fact of the matter is, whatever you want to say about him, his failings, those failings for the most part of just being a man that's stuck in a political context. For all intents and purposes, when I look out at that field and I say, who is the most earnest of the candidates that are out there? And who is the guy who really means it? Not those corporate hacks. Who's the guy that really means it? And the number one thing that comes on the lips of the individuals are Bernie fucking Sanders. We are living in the world that Bernie Sanders built. He starts as a front runner. Like I said, I know some of us aren't still Bernie, but regardless of what you think of him, you have to at the very least own up and give him the credit he deserves on that point, because he pushed this particular stuff into the public consciousness. Schools, expansion of Medicare, Social Security, and yeah, tip of the spear, Medicare for all. I'll leave it here. Thanks all. If you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe, and you can always support through PayPal or Patreon. Thanks all.